In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
It is 100% real. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Curious Dimension podcast, where we explore the mysteries of the unknown, delve into the fascinating world of UFO disclosure, sacred geometry, crop circles, and more. I am your host, Matt Barone. I hope that you've been enjoying the conversations as much as I have been hosting them. Don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps us reach more curious minds like yours. And if you want to stay updated with all of our latest episodes, be sure to hammer that subscribe button. You won't want to miss any of the exciting discussions we have lined up. Finally, we love hearing from you. Drop a comment below with your thoughts on today's episode or any questions that you might have. Your feedback means the world to me, and it helps shape future content. I thought it would be a good idea to line up some guests over the next month as we approach the upcoming UAP hearings on November 13th, led by Representative Nancy Mace. So stay tuned. We have a lot of experts coming on that can help us understand where this topic of UFO disclosure is headed. My guest today is Ryan Wood. Ryan is a leading authority on the top secret classified MJ-12 intelligence documents, also known as the MJ-12 documents. He is also an expert on UFO crashes and military retrievals, specifically the 1941 Cape Girardeau, Missouri UFO crash. He is a frequent lecturer on the topic of UFOs. Ryan has taught college courses and made numerous presentations about UFOs to civic organizations and at UFO conferences. Ryan has a lot of information on this subject, so let's get right into it. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with all this, and maybe touch on your dad for a little bit, because I know that's part of the story as well.
Sure. Thanks, Matt, for inviting me to talk to your audience and explain a little bit about my history and background and how I engaged in all this novel stuff, so to speak. For me, it all started when I was 15 years old, when Stan Friedman, famous ufologist, was working for my father on an anti-gravity project and came home for dinner with my sister, my mom, and I. The usual dinner conversation a little bit, but I learned there that, oh yeah, Dad's working on a gravity project. But it's not just that. It was after the whole enchilada, so to speak. They were doing abduction research and regression hypnosis on a couple people too, to try to better understand the nature of the physics and so forth. And also as a teenager, I remember going out to the middle of Joshua Tree out in California desert to this really small cinder block house and slept on the couch. One of my dad's friends or employees had a magnetometer set up with a strip chart recorder, and they were picking up details of anomalous events that occurred. Nothing happened when I was there, but I certainly saw some impressive responses on magnetic fields. So that was my first sort of introduction to ufology. My dad really got involved in ufology when his boss came into his office and said, "Bob, what are you going to do for the retirement of General Schriever?" Because he was in charge of all sorts of rockets and rocket scientists, worked for Douglas Aircraft Company and McDonnell Douglas. And he whimsically said, "We're going to tell him how UFOs do work." And he said, "Great, go ahead, do that." And so he read like 50 UFO books, and then he was making a presentation to his management. They said, "Bob, what are you doing for fun?" And he said, "I've read 50 UFO books, and there's only one question left." "What's that, Bob?" "Are we going to figure out how gravity works before or after Lockheed does?" And that was the ticket. And they gave him close to $6 million in today's money back then to go research that. And that's how Stan Friedman got hired and so forth. So that's a long-winded answer to, I got exposed to it at an early age.
What year is this?
This is 1967, 68. And then a little later for high school, senior project, I did a Michelson-Morley interferometer and tried to change the speed of light and entered the science fair and won first place. And so I was piggybacking on my dad's experiments, but that was fun.
So you got exposed to this at an early age and started looking into it. So at what point in time do these documents start to come across your purview and your dad's purview?
Yeah, my dad's purview in 1984 with the Jamie Chanderay Eisenhower briefing document that was leaked to the Jamie Chanderay, an LA producer. And Stan Friedman was doing most of the research and analysis and wrote Top Secret Magic. And my dad was still working. He was still working at McDonnell Douglas and then Boeing at the space station. He didn't retire until 93. And so Stan did most of the work on that, and it was really not until 1993 with the Special Operations Manual, Extraterrestrial Entities, Technology Recovery and Disposal, that was leaked to Don Berliner that both he and myself got far more interested in the Majestic documents.
So, so when we say the Majestic documents, is that really the kickoff of this? Because I've heard the story that Linda Moulton Howe was leaked something by Richard Doty in the early 80s. So there's a lot of these documents that are floating around that have the MJ-12 on or the magic guys only on it. So when did people first realize that MJ or Majestic was a thing? When did that kind of get
Well,
leaked?
that was the first thing that happened was in 1984 with Jamie Chanderay. As I understand, Linda Moulton Howe was given a limited hangout by Richard Doty, who was part of Air Force Office of Special Investigations at the time. Do I trust Richard Doty? Hell no. Is he a counterintelligence agent? Very likely, still to this day, even though I'm going to be on stage with him in Albuquerque, New Mexico. But nevertheless, the Special Operations Manual came in 94, but then there was a variety of documents that came through Timothy Cooper and other mailings and drops. So the big broad brush on the Majestic documents is we have some 3,500 pages from 7 different sources spanning 18, 19 years. And so there's a lot of different information and sources, and some are original paper and ink, some are photocopies, some are undeveloped film or tri-X film that was developed. And so you have lots of different modes of how you got it from different sources. And if I step back and say, what's the most credible, I would say it's the Special Operations Manual to Don Berliner.
Let's tell that story. So how did you guys come across that? Was that leaked? Was that, obviously it was leaked, but did somebody send that to you directly or how did that come into your possession?
So it was mailed from La Crosse, Wisconsin in the Quillen Pharmacy, a little green box, and it had a roll of undeveloped tri-X film on it. And it was mailed to Don Berliner in Washington, D.C., who was an Aviation Week and space reporter who got it and developed it and made prints with my dad because they knew each other. And from there, they said, oh my goodness, this is fascinating, and decided to start authenticating the documents to the best that they could. And
Before we do that, before we get into the authentication process, can you briefly summarize what's in that manual? Because it's explosive.
yeah, no, that's a good point. So it's a field manual, 6 by 9-inch special operations field manual designed, in our estimation, for crash retrieval units. It gives a little purpose and scope. It gives a description of extraterrestrial biological entity type 1 and type 2. It describes how to do cover stories, elements of down satellite, elements of biological weapon, elements of radiation spill or chemical spill. It talks about how to manage the site. It talks about the minutia of how to pack up various parts and where to send them specifically. to Area 51 S4 or to Wright-Patterson Blue Lab. Uh, and it's very detailed in that live living entities are to be sent to OPNAC BDS-01 and and there's a UFOB, unidentified flying object, which is the term they were using in the military in mid-50s.
Highly recommend you look at it. It's
Yeah, yeah, it's wild.
now that was mailed in a film, right? So there it is. There's the
Yeah.
song.
So it was mailed as an undeveloped film and then was developed. And then, so it had all sorts of references in the back. It's a 32-page report or manual. So it has lots of copious.
When we're going through the authentication process, and just to let people know, you've authenticated a lot of documents and you put it through the ringer. Can we talk about like this, do you call it a 6-point sort of inspection where you look through these questions or how do you do it?
Yeah, it seems in every document, there's a different path. If you have original paper and ink, like in the Encyclopedia of Flying Saucers, you can do forensics on that. And so that's a different path. That's one thing. Or you can look at the content. Is there anything checkable in the content? That's another path. You can look at the word usage, the sort of etymology of how the words were constructed at the time for the particular author, which goes into another path, which is the forensic linguistics of a particular document. So if it was signed by Einstein, did Einstein write it? Is his linguistic fingerprint on it or not? And then you can look at, is it typed or is it typeset? And if it's typeset, you can do some different analysis, like in the Special Operations Manual. You can look at the authenticity of the typesetting process. Does it file the government printing style manual, for example? Or if it's typed, are the typewriter fonts traditionally used, or are the other markings like the war seal or the top secret stamps or the file numbers or file markings, which is part of the content, are those checkable? Can you prove that it's accurate for the era? So those are some of the things that you look at. But if you want, we can go back to the Special Operations Manual and specifically talk about why it's authentic.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So you get the film footage, obviously it's developed and you see what this is explosive in there. So as you're going through it, what's lending the credibility to it and let's go over that process.
That's a great question, Matt. So in this particular case, the first thing we did, or my father did actually, Dr. Bob Wood, recently deceased, like 6 weeks ago or 8 weeks.
Sorry to hear that.
And so he retyped the whole thing and created a Word document of it and tried to be as completely same, accurate, and fair to exactly how it was presented in the film. And in that process, he discovered several aspects of the etymology or the word usage. For example, screwdriver was 2 words rather than 1 word where it is today. This is leaked in 1993-4 timeframe. So just so everybody knows, there's no computers, there's no Quark Express, there's no InDesign, there's none of that. It's the glint in some software engineer's eye, maybe. So there is no credible computer faking craft out there. Now, it's a typeset document, so there's word usage around first aid, for example. That was capitalized. This follows the style manual details, or federal was capitalized, and then an artifact of the hot lead printing press was in the word synchronizer. The Z is raised off the line because of debris in the hot lead printing press. Individual character Z wasn't used very often, and it got less use, and so it showed an anomaly. We learned this not through our insight, but by going and visiting Robert McCarter, who was the government printing style manual expert. He had written one and edited two or three of the government printing style manuals in the 50s and 60s. He just retired from the government printing office in Washington, D.C. This is a big, thick book about exactly how you print government documents.
Wow.
We went to his house and showed him the document, and he looked at it and said, "Oh, wow, the Z is raised off the line. I know it's a hot lead printing press and it follows the form factor and the details." He spotted a dozen things that were correct.
It's
And said,
amazing that someone like that exists who has that specialized knowledge of just printing.
yeah, exactly. Right. And hot lead printing. And they don't use a hot lead printing press anymore, except for invitations at the White House that where they want an embossed feel on it. And he concluded that the CIA most likely printed this, and it was down on 10th Street over here in a cage. So it was a very interesting meeting.
I'm sure.
And then I did some work on the provenance, so to speak, or the change control page. On the inside cover of the manual is stamped Unit KB-88, Building 21, Kirkland Air Force Base. And I said, well, okay, let's go to Kirkland Air Force Base. Let's find out if there's a Building 21. So he talked to the facilities manager for that time frame. Oh, yeah, here's the map. Here's the Building 21. And different building number now, but back then it was. And it said Building 21, Kirkland Air Force Base, which is MEX, N.MEX is the correct abbreviation for the postal code for New Mexico in the 50s. If it said NM, you would say, oh my goodness, it's a fake for some reason, or you have to explain that. So then in the change control page, there's some initials. It's basically all certain officers come in and say, page 22 is outdated now. I'm replacing it with page 22. And I sign my initials and the authority, and you put it in the front of the book. And so there's two people that use their initials, JRT and EWL. This happened from 1954 to about 1957 during that time frame. And so then I went to the Albuquerque phone book and found all the JRTs and EWLs. And sure enough, Jess R. Totten and Captain Earl William Lewis, I think. And they both lived on Perimeter Road, about 4 houses from each other, inside Kirkland Air Force Base. Kaboom! There you go. That's good providence. It's really rare. Why in the world would somebody fake it to do that level of detail? Why send it to the press? If you're trying to scare the living shit out of Russia or China or some third-party adversary, that we got ET technology and ET bodies, and don't mess with us or we're going to laser your ass to the ground or something. It just is not the way you would do a psychological warfare operation.
It doesn't make any sense. Can we talk about the leaking of these photos? Do you think that some of these were leaked intentionally? Are some of these like by accident? Are people doing this? There's always conspiracy around the timing of disclosure. It's slow this or it's that. Are there just people in there that are just like, I can't go to my grave knowing that this is a thing. I have to at least tell somebody, and I'm going to mail it to this person because I know they'll get it out to people. What is your perspective on that?
I think the perspective with relation to the Majestic documents is there's several different leakers, and that they each had different motivations, but they may overlap in many ways. Well, the most traditional one was, let's try to get some fame and fortune, but I think that was too dangerous to actually admit that you did it, because you might have been sent to jail, but maybe not. I don't know. I think in the case of some of the Tim Cooper and Thomas Cantwell leaks in the mid 90s, it was Thomas Cantwell was dying of cancer and he thought it was a crime against humanity that we should not do this. And so he leaked it. Uh, but he may have gotten it from other people who got it from other people. And there's always these layers of uh, counterintelligence, so to speak. How do you tell a lie? You have a cover story inside a cover story inside a cover story.
Right.
And so there's fame, there's money, there's I'm dying, I don't give a guess, the morally right thing to do, and anger associated with right about this time, the Air Force had control of their part of the alien tech. And in the mid 50s, the Atomic Energy Commission came in and said, no, it's all ours. We're taking it all over and we're classifying it. And you Air Force guys, you can't have it anymore. You're out of the picture. And they may have been pissed about that. So anyway, those are some ideas.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm sure there's people that were happy on all sides of this. One of the things, if we can go back to the Eisenhower or the Truman letter from Einstein and Oppenheimer, one of the things that strikes me about that, and for anybody that hasn't seen that document, again, I'll put links to that in the description so you can go check it out. But that's about a 5 or 6 page document, a letter to Harry Truman, I'm assuming.
Oh, are you talking about the Einstein Oppenheimer letter?
Yeah, is that to who is that to?
It's
Just
normal celestial relationships with celestial
relationships with inhabitants of celestial bodies.
Yes, exactly.
And it's about a 5 or 6 page document outlining what would happen if we encountered beings from other planets that were coming here.
Could we colonize, or could there be a diplomatic relationship? And Einstein's sort of assessment was, if there's not a political unity on planet Earth, there couldn't be any relationship based on traditional lines of thinking, which I think is pretty prescient for Einstein back in 47.
Forward thinking.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very interesting think piece. Of all the leaked Majestic documents, that's the one that sort of goes to the bigger picture of what's our relationship with the ETs or these other worldly beings, and what we might think about that or do with that, both morally and legally and so forth.
I find this document interesting for many reasons, obvious, but the forward-thinking aspect of it, and then also where we are today as people that are divided, right? If you were going to have relationships with a group of people from another planet, even if it was in our solar system, you'd probably want to have some cohesiveness on your planet, right? There's just chaos all around us. And, you probably have to get your act together first on your planet before you start to have a relationship with a group of people on another planet. I'm sure we would feel that way. We wouldn't go try to make friends with people on another planet. This is out of control. Like, you guys got to sort yourself out first before we can.
You're right on, man. And this goes to one of my fundamental closing thoughts. Not that we're going to close, but when will the ETs show up? And they're not going to land on the White House lawn or announce to the world that we're here until, in my opinion, we've done a few things. Have you fed everybody on planet Earth? Have you educated everybody on planet Earth? Have you gotten rid of all your nukes? Have you cleaned up the environment and stopped all your wars and had a stable environment? If you can achieve that, maybe 2060, then we can talk. I think in between now and then, it's going to be pulling teeth to get more and more aspects of disclosure done. And I think it will never succeed in a complete way.
I don't see like an over announcement. I know a lot of people in the UFO community want that. But I didn't think that would ever happen. In fact, I think a lot of the reason we're getting a lot of information right now is just because there's been some illegalities and some things that have happened in the past that are just cannot continue. And now that Congress has their teeth in it, they're going to try and right some wrongs. And I think because of people are getting to know some information, like had things been done differently in the past, we might not ever know about it.
I might add that we did a variety of things to authenticate that.
Let's go into that. Yeah.
So it's signed by Oppenheimer and Einstein, just typed. And there's some comments by Vannevar Bush.
It's okay, Ryan. I'm just going to pull it up. Do you mind if I just share it?
Feel free.
Let me just pull it up here. Let me know when you can see this.
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. This is what we're talking about, everybody.
It's, this June of 47 up here in this corner is written actually by Timothy Cooper. This file OSRD, Office of Scientific Research and Development, which is the precursor to NACA. And if you scroll to the last page, there we go. Down at the comments here, it says, the bottom, it says, myself and Marshall have read this, and I must admit there's some logic. But I think the president won't consider it for obvious reasons. I understand Oppenheimer may approach Marshall, and they attended the ceremony. As I understand it, Marshall rebutted the idea of Oppenheimer discussing this with the president. I talked to Gordon, and they agreed. It's Gordon Gray, Vannevar Bush. So that's the signature of Vannevar Bush. Very consistent, and I talked to Gordon, that's Gordon Gray, and General Marshall. But the point is that we took that, we've tried to determine who wrote it. So the choices are three choices. Did Einstein write it? Did Oppenheimer write it? Or did Tim Cooper, where we got it from, write it or fake it? Mm-hmm. And so we used, Tim Cooper had written a book about White Sands Proving Grounds. We got examples of writing from the National Archives for both Oppenheimer and Einstein back in the era, back in 1947. Basically, you want to make sure that it's writing from them back in the right time frame. And then we handed it all over to Carol Chowsky, who's a forensic linguistic expert. She put it in her system and gave probabilities associated with the various people. And the conclusion was that it's highly likely that Einstein wrote it. And the punctuation style, it's everything. It's adverbial clauses and noun usage and sentence structure and readability indexes. And you just go deep dive into fingerprinting somebody's writing style. And you can still go down, did he dictate it in German? And did the secretary translate it and type it? Which the word, some of the critics say celestial is misspelled. How in the world could Einstein misspell celestial? It's not that common a word, and the secretary may not have seen it very often and just consistently mistyped it.
I don't see Einstein or Oppenheimer sitting at a typewriter typing. No, I'm doing that. I mean, they're sitting on a chair and they're dictating it to their secretary.
Yeah.
They're not painstakingly waiting. And
yeah, they're not doing that. I agree.
I've read through this thing a few times, and there are certain words in there, like resnalis, like you said, and there was another word in there that caught my attention that meant biblical stories. Is that Pentateuch?
Yeah, Pentateuch.
So, right, no one, if you were going to fake this when did this document surface? In the 90s?
Surfaced in 94, 95, I'd have to look.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it. So it doesn't seem like a word you would use if you were going to.
No, it's something a German scientist would use. Yeah.
So very interesting.
Yeah. So that's an interesting sort of where we use forensic linguistics. And that's one method of doing authentication of these majestic documents.
Very interesting. If it's okay, I'd love to pull up the song. I want everyone to take a look at this. Yeah. go through a couple pages if you don't mind.
Sure.
Let me know when you can see this.
Yeah, I can see it.
So I guess the cover page.
Yeah, let's start there. That's good. One of the challenges that we still have left on this document is that there is no known publicly available special operations manual, of anything. And now the type style of SOM 1 at the very top is correct. It's the right font, the right style for field manuals and for other things. To give you an example, I suspect there is a special operations manual for how to handle tactical nuclear weapons, 155 millimeter shells at the Library of Congress, but they haven't declassified it, so I can't really check that. If you scroll down the war seal at the very bottom there, people said it's fake because they used the war seal, and the Department of Defense said in 1952, thou shall not use the war seal anymore. But I found many of the documents in 54, 55, later on, that did use the war seal. So it was just like,
Just what people thought.
and then at the very bottom there on the first page, it's really hard to see, but there's the Adjutant General's expense code. So this is how the government printing manual, how it was printed, this 270-400-401. And we haven't been able to find a reference to that or who's paying for this printing for all the money. But that's still an open action for it. But if you go to the next page, you can see that Kirkland Air Force Base, N.MX, MEX. It looks like M_X there, but when you get the loop out. And then on the right-hand side, you see the various change control pages and the initials of EWL and JRT on the right-hand side. And
those are the individuals that you identified that were there at that time?
Yeah, we're there at the time. So if you go to the next page, that's a better shot. And then page 4, this is
We tend to get into the wild stuff that's actually in the book, the table of contents.
Yeah, this is the table of contents. Purpose and goals. It's Executive Order of Harry Truman, September 24th, 1947, establishing a top secret research and development intelligence gathering organization known as Majestic-12. But then it goes into recovery operations, technology recovery, and the security classification, the history of the group. And you can just go right through this manual and you go, wow, this is really description of the craft, various shapes, the cigar shape, even the triangle shape. Many people today believe a lot of the triangles are our craft. I think there were triangular craft back in the 50s and earlier. That were theirs. This one is description of extraterrestrial biological entities, type 1 and type 2. I think type 2 is the typical gray alien.
3.5, 4.5 feet tall.
Yeah, feet.
Large heads.
No external ears. Skin is pale, bluish gray color. Being somewhat darker. Very smooth, fine cell. No hair. Arms long and proportional to legs.
Do we have a time frame of when we think this manual was created? Is this like in the 50s?
It was 54 when it was stamped. So it was April 54. So I suspect they probably had a problem with incomplete, sloppy procedures. And so they wanted to create a manual where it spelled it all out. They could control it better. And so they did this manual.
That makes sense.
And so it just goes on, description of the craft. The other big page that would be fun to go to is what to do with it's a horizontal page.
Oh, this one?
Yeah, this one. It's kind of hard to read. There you go. There you go. There, perfect. Very well. Well done. Intact operational or semi-intact aircraft or extraterrestrial design and manufacture. Area 51S4. And there's one. Living non-human organisms in apparent good and reasonable health. Why would they put that in the manual if they hadn't had it before?
Right.
Just contingency maybe, but it goes to OPNAC. We still don't know what OPNAC officially stands for. BBS-01, I think, is Bronx Biological Section, or BBS-01. Dela Frog was one of the guys that did an autopsy of an alien. And then printed maps and charts, electronics recordings for Building 21, KB-88, right where this manual came from.
Right. KBA Kirtland Air Force.
There we go. And then the Blue Lab, non-mechanical, non-electronic materials of support nature, such as clothing, personal belongings, organic ingestibles. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's just like this arcane detail.
yes,
Like, why would you go to all this trouble? It just doesn't make sense. To the psyop narrative, to me, why would you go to get no bang for your buck? It just doesn't make any sense. And you just start to scrape away all the BS. The thing that makes sense is that someone took pictures of this and mailed it out because it was a
right. And even if it was a psyop, the last thing you'd want to do is, okay, so the Russians get this, or the Chinese, etc., and they look at it and say, wow, these guys have ET craft. I'm going to go now invest a bunch more resources in counterintelligence, and I want to penetrate Area 51. I'm sending young scientists loyal to the core to get their PhD in nuclear physics and theoretical physics and join the Air Force and get in the Air Force Academy. And I know I have a long shot in getting selected, but nevertheless, I'm trying to penetrate and get into the super secret organizations that control this ET technology. And I'm on a lifetime mission to penetrate the darkest super secret of American tech. And the defense contractors are equally vulnerable, maybe more so. Anyway, so that's one of the other juicy ones. And then if you go to the last page, I think you can turn it the other way.
I'll rotate it back around.
Yeah.
There we go. This page.
Yeah. It's a little hard to read, but there's all these publications,
Training.
publication numbers, next to training manuals and photographic equipment and test equipment. And all those manual numbers are correct. All the references are right.
So those are references to actual manuals from other things that actually exist.
You can get them in a government document library, or you can get them at the National Archives. Exactly.
Supports the validity that someone took pictures of this because it was a real thing.
One of the other things we could do is if you scroll down a little bit and see the fingers, here we go. These are not very good web images, but on first generation negatives print, and there's enough detail that you could give it to a forensic anthropologist and say, tell me about this human being.
Really?
Yeah. So what is the ethnicity of this hand structure, fingernails and finger structure? You can clearly, it's a white guy, but you might be able to pin down some more ethnicities and details and get more detail about who the leaker might be.
Right. Isn't that interesting how you can extract so much information from three little fingers?
Right. There's many times he used different fingers. So you have a lot of fingers to choose, but
right. There's fingers on this page.
And fingers.
Right.
There's fingers on many pages. And it's cropped too.
And nobody in the 50s is thinking someday someone's going to figure out who I might be because of my fingers.
Exactly.
That's insane.
Well, actually, there's a few things left that could be done if you had money and time.
What are some of those, if you wanted to take it to the next level? I'm sure you thought about this a bunch.
I'm already 99.9%.
Right. It's probably not necessary at this point.
I would try to get another special operations manual declassified. That would take a day at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. to try to identify one. And then you might have to wait a few years unless you want to sue them. And if you want to sue them, then you might be able to get it done faster. So that would be one approach. And doing an investigation on the field, the Adjutant General's cost codes on the bottom on the front page, trying to figure out the entire structure of traditional field manual in that time frame, and then maybe classified field manuals. But to try to pin down whose cost code is this? Is this the CIA's cost code? Or is this the Air Force's cost code? Or the Atomic Energy Commission cost code? And then once you can do that, if it turns out it's the Navy or something, that'd be weird. And you go, well, wow, what's going on here? Or if you turn out it's, something else, I don't know. So
Very interesting. Something that I just thought of back in 1947. I just finished reading Don Schmidt's book, Witness to Roswell, which I read a couple books on the Roswell incident. But if you read that book and you think nothing happened, I don't know what to do for you. Anyway, so in 1947, when that happens, in my mind, if you're Truman and you're getting a call in the middle of the night and this is happening, who are you going to send out there to analyze this? Who is the most famous scientist in the planet at that time? You're probably going to call Oppenheimer.
they're in the Interplanetary Phenomenon Unit, the IPU report about the Roswell crashes that's on the Majestic website.
You got to tell me about that because I don't even know about it. What is this?
This is the counterintelligence guys go out there like 8 July, I think, and interview a bunch of people. And it says right there in the report that
Von Braun?
Von Braun and
Is this a definite? I can pull up on your website.
yeah, it is. I'll just tell you. It said, I'll read it to you. The special radiological team accompanied by the SED, Sandia Engineering District, and security detail from the Sandia base, under orders from Colonel S.V. Hasbrook of USA, which is the 4th Army, Armed Forces Special Weapons Project, secured the immediate area surrounding the crash site. Selected scientists from the General Advisory Committee of the Atomic Energy Commission, most notably J. Robert Oppenheimer, was identified at LZ2, Landing Zone 2, as well as other members. Among paperclip specialists identified were Werner von Braun, Ernest Steinhoff from the Air Material Con, and Herbert Stronghold of the Aeromedical Laboratory. Those were the bodies went. A lot of the bodies went to the Aeromedical Laboratory. That's just in this first document that's dated 22 July 1947. But the guys were on scene earlier than that. The key guy is Lieutenant General Twining, who went out there and basically ran the show and got everybody to go do the work. And
he was point man out there.
He was point man. And they worked all summer, basically. They had the crash. And probably, I think there's at the Truman Presidential Library, there's a meeting on July 8th, I believe, between President and Senator Hatch of New Mexico. They would have sub out, but very likely, I think the senator was told something. So the president certainly knew sometime. The White House phone logs for that time frame could be interesting to look at. I think I may have those, but I haven't looked at them in a while.
Yeah, that would be an interesting time to look at what calls are coming in and what calls are going out of the White House around 1947.
Yeah, and it's surprising that it was on the whole push button world that this cable connected and this cable, like in the movies. And the secretaries were very good. They were such and such person calling for such and such person, and they would type it on the typewriter, and they would log in the date, the time, and how many minutes it was. And they would disconnect it. And so there's all these logs that are particularly helpful in other crashes in the 1950 El Indio Guerrero crash.
So those would be
in the Truman Presidential Library.
okay.
So they're there, the White House phone logs, and the White House calendars, Truman's calendar of what he did every day. I'm sure President Biden is probably scheduled every 15 minutes. I'm sure there's big blocks of time that are scheduled out, but it's pretty rigorous.
I'm sure. And I guess there's so many different avenues you can go down. The documented rabbit holes are probably just endless, right?
Well, that's true. In my book, Magic Eyes Only, I take a lot of the work of Leonard Stringfield with UFO crashes and retrievals and add more crashes and retrievals and weave in the Majestic documents in support of a variety of events. It was originally published in 2005 with 74 crashes from around the world. And I updated it last December, I think. It has 104 crash events from around the world. And I left a few on my desk because I just wanted to get it done. Realistically, there's probably overrepresented English-speaking countries because I don't have any data on Russia or China or Africa.
Which there undoubtedly are.
Opportunity. So there's probably more like 200 or 250 worldwide crashes.
That's the startling thing when you start to research this stuff. You start to see the abundance of data there is, and then similarities between the stories. And then the fun part is the speculation on what's going on and what does it mean? How do these things crash? Are they being brought down? The other question that I go back and forth with is, has somebody cracked anti-gravitics and some of the stuff we see today? Is that a very human thing? And there's two narratives out there that are a bit polarizing. Some people say absolutely not, we couldn't figure it out. And then the other narrative is that, yeah, of course, that's what most people are saying.
Let me talk about why they crash or shoot down first. It's a very common question. I think the senator from Missouri asked it in the congressional hearings. So why they crash, Grush answered it in his testimony in one aspect. He said a certain number of events or a certain number of military operations end in mission failure. So there's a reliability problem. The more likely scenario with ET stuff is these are disposable biological drones or disposable craft. It's a drone. We don't pick up the drones that are shot down in Ukraine. There's the notion of deliberate seeding of kindergarten planets, where you give them this advanced tech, maybe they'll think that education is more important and manufacture more PhDs and study this stuff and realize that we shouldn't be trying to kill each other all the time and get rid of the nukes. There's the deliberate attempt to shoot them down with proximity fuses in World War II or surface area missiles and things like that. Or there's the radar discussion about more so.
And that one.
His book, The Day After Roswell. And so those are some of the ideas about why they crash, or natural phenomenon too. A good negative lightning bolt in the middle of New Mexico is 10x a positive, the more common lightning bolt. And it's maybe something that could have interfered with the navigational system and caused, or they ran out of fuel.
They all sound logical.
Yeah, so that's why they might crash. And then the second part of your question, which I've now lost.
Or are they theirs always? Could we not have cracked any gravitics?
Oh, gravitics, yes, yeah. This is what's fascinating me professionally and personally is the gravity control aspect. We all know that they have a method of conquering inertia and right angle turns and ability to go to the stars. And clearly you don't do that with Musk's SpaceX rockets.
Right.
So the question is, has there been a breakthrough in gravity control? Mm-hmm. And my opinion today is that yes, there has been. And one of the key pieces of evidence I'll point to in ufology is the story of Eddie Laxon. So he's in the Air Force. He's a pilot instructor, Air Force electronics technician, and he's driving to work in Oklahoma at 5 in the morning. and he rounds the bend, and what's crossed in front of him is this teardrop shaped 75-foot long craft is landed on the road, and a man in a two-piece fatigues is standing outside the door with a flashlight, and it's got some downlights as well. And the front of the craft has what Eddie talked about was piece of traditional bomber canopy that was used. And the air and letters on the side that said TL4716 or something, or test lenticular device or something. And he got out of his car, started walking towards the man, and the man saw him, got in it and closed the door, and this whirring, buzzing noise, this hum, and went off and hovered up and then zipped off. And another witness saw it and was reported to Project Blue Book. And Eddie was interviewed multiple times about this event.
Where my mind goes to this, and I think about what human beings have achieved throughout history. And one of the things that I see is people don't give human beings enough credit for the brain power that we have, right? So I understand my level of intelligence, but I also know that there's a range of this. And there are certain individuals that are on this other wavelength. They have a high degree of bandwidth. They're capable of amazing things. And I think that if you're the United States and you're the superpower and you give 80 years, a blank checkbook, and very high brain power, and you throw it at something, I would be very shocked if you couldn't crack at least a couple insights off of this stuff and make something that can do things amazing.
Yeah. And that's a good point, Matt, and I think that actually it was the Glenn L. Martin Company. It happened earlier, but the Glenn L. Martin Company formed this group, the RIAS group, in 1955, Research Institute of Advanced Studies in Baltimore, Maryland. And they had all these top-notch people, George S. Trimble and the Coleman filters guy, really bright theoretical physicists and mathematicians, Lewis Witten. When I plugged all their names into, there's like 15 names, Google, they all have their own Wikipedia pages, and they're all stunningly brilliant. And it goes to your point, your comment, that these people are in a different lane, and I think it's that group that was tasked by Mr. Martin and Bender and George Trimble to go crack gravity, figure it out. It was the buzz. My father was right in it in the 60s, but it was talked about. There was newspaper articles and all sorts of buzz at Convair and Lear and Signal Corps and so forth. Lots of people in the 50s and early 60s were well aware that gravity and the G engines are coming. And so they were working hard on it. And I think they cracked it in 1960 and reduced it to practice in maybe 62 and designed the crafts and had it running by 64. Maybe earlier, maybe they got it from their Nazi reverse engineering in 1933. This is David Grush's testimony before Congress. He talked about the Italy 1933.
Is it the magenta?
Yeah, the magenta craft. And so Italy and Germany were allies in World War II. And I would think that Hitler would have said, show it to me. Let me who's got the best engineers in the world? We do. Marconi probably did his best and so forth. So it may have gone there and they may have worked on it, and the Glock may have had something to do with it, but I don't have much evidence that the Glock, and I don't know about that whole Nazi Antarctica, all that stuff. It seems it's underdeveloped.
Right.
From an evidence point of view.
For sure. Ryan, I'd love to finish up and have you talk a little about UFO decks.
Oh,
I'd love to. And so I didn't even know that existed until you sent me that. But can you tell us a little bit about what that is and how does it work?
Yes, we got.
All right.
Well, if you at the very top, let's go to that for a second.
Okay.
The AI ufologist speaks. So if you click on that, there's some questions that people have asked. If you scroll down a little bit, tell me about T. Townsend Brown's claims. I did a few sample questions there, but the real thing is that if you scroll up a little bit and you click on ask your question, for example, you come up with your name and ask your question of the AI ufologist. So what this does is I have scanned in and crunched through a retrieval augmented AI database, which created a ufological AI. So I have 400 books in ufology, all the MUFON journals, all the MUFON proceedings, all the crash conferences, all sorts of FBI files, a huge trove. It's now 300 and what does it say? 78,000 pages. Yeah, if you click that and go to the home page, yeah, and scroll down, 373,000. Now, I got to update this because I think we're over 400,000 pages, but you can ask any question you want. And it's good to be verbose, so to speak. People say, what is the ET agenda? That's an okay question. But you say, tell me about RH negative people in relation to abductees. Why does that occur? So when you ask your question, whatever question you might have, be it about a crash, anything with the witnesses, give me 15 witnesses of the Roswell crash that are firsthand testimony. Explain why they're significant or important. So if you just be a little more verbose and use more adjectives, it helps give you a better answer. So you can just ask your question right there, and within a day or so, you'll get an answer. It's going to be live and interactive eventually, but I'm not there yet. And my book, The AI Ufologist, is where I took the inspiration from, as I asked the 30 biggest questions in ufology. They're fascinating me in increasing sophistication to AI. And what amazed me was the completeness and robustness of the answers. For somebody who'd been in the field a long time, I got, some cases I got a lot of the stuff right, but in other cases they go, wow, I didn't know that. It's so complete that it's very powerful. And that's on Amazon, $15.
That's the AI ufologist.
The AI ufologist. And the other one that's breakthrough that I just put out like a week ago is UFOs, Who Knows, which is on Amazon. And this is famous quotations in ufology and their bios. So you have astronauts, presidents, celebrities, religious leaders, Congress, and so it's a broad swath, engineers and scientists. These are all famous people, 182 of them. And this goes to one of your earlier comments, is it's this mosaic or compendium of evidence. It's me.
Yeah.
Magic Eyes Only. It was because it was the overwhelming breadth of all these crashes, of all these witness statements, of all these documents. That's what sink it for me. And hopefully it'll sink it for your audience.
Absolutely. Ryan, I think it's a great way to end this. I really want to thank you for your time. You're an absolute legend in this field. I'd love to have you back on sometime in the future. I can think of your
more
book.
about that, or talk about gravity.
Yeah, there's so many different avenues to go down. I could talk to you all night long. Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack here. But yeah, thank you so much, Ryan. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for watching the show. I hope you guys are enjoying the content. If you're finding any value, please hit that subscribe button, that like button, and leave a comment. It doesn't cost you anything, and it really helps out the show.